All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the second channel. We're back in business. Today, I was looking through older submissions and I realized that there was a submission from a patron that I missed like a few months ago. So I'm so sorry about that. These are three poems from an author named Mackenzie Leigh, and I'm quite confident that I haven't taken a look at these. I looked back at the older channel videos. It was submitted in September 2024. And I don't think any of the videos since then have featured this author or this work. So, Mackenzie, I'm super sorry. I don't know how this one slipped through the cracks, but we're going to take a look at it today. So, before we jump in, there are just a couple of content warnings. This first poem here, there is a content warning for sexual assault. And then in the next two poems, there are sexual implications, according to the author. So, with those things in mind, we will go ahead and jump into the poetry. But before we do, as always, just want to read this statement. Keep in mind, I'm not a professional reviewer. I'm just some guy on the internet who likes reading and writing. The opinions expressed in this video are only opinions. My interpretation of or reaction to the work will not be the same as everyone else's, for better or for worse. I will look for the good and the bad, but no matter what I say, don't be too hard on yourself. Just keep writing. And for those in the comments, please be respectful. Also, I'm so sorry for any mistakes or mispronunciations of names or words. If I come across a word that I don't want to say for whatever reason, I will replace it with the word blank. Okay, so let's start. This first poem is titled, I Should Have Prayed. I wish I had been Daphne. I wish it had been me, sprinting through the woods, being pricked by thorns, the underbrush scraping my feet. I wish Apollo, god of the golden sun, had chased me through the thicket, unfazed by the branches whipping him, or the rocky soil sticking to his heels. If I were to look back at him, would I see the flash of dark desire in his eyes? I wish I had pleaded with Poseidon to save me, in any way he could. Kill Apollo, kill me, just spare my dignity. I wish I had been the one to be turned into the laurel tree on the water's glass edge, and watched Apollo's eyes flash with disappointment as he turned on his heel and abandoned his prize. I wish I could wake as Daphne, to have my body and mind intact, to be that tree on the shore, to be whole once more. And I wish I had prayed. Oh God, how I wish I had prayed. Okay, a lot of strong stuff here. So I'll start by saying that I don't think I'm actually familiar with the myth of Daphne. That being said, even though I'm not familiar, I think I gleaned everything I need to know from the poem's context, which is actually really great. And like, it didn't feel heavy-handed. It didn't feel like I was just sitting here while you were retelling me a myth. No, there's obviously more to it than that. But it sounds like Daphne in Greek mythology was going to be raped by Apollo, and then Daphne prayed to Poseidon, and Poseidon turned her into a tree, a laurel tree, right next to a lake, so that Apollo couldn't go through with it. So that's what it sounds like, and I guess I'll verify later. I could now, but I think it would take a minute, and we should just stay in the poem for now. So it's cool that I can, assess all of that within the poem. So the poem is still accessible, even if you are not familiar with this myth like I am not. So with that, let's go back line by line. I wish I had been Daphne. I wish it had been me, sprinting through the woods, being pricked by thorns, the underbrush scraping my feet. So those were definitely the first lines to stand out to me as strong. You really get the sense that you are the speaker, because even though it's like very brief, that imagery is still pretty impactful, right? Sprinting through the woods, being pricked by thorns, the underbrush scraping my feet. Scraping, that's a strong verb right there, and then pricked is pretty good too. Sprinting is arguably the weakest verb here because, it's just one that we see more often than, say, pricked or scraping. At least I see it more often in the stuff I read. That being said, like I said, this all still paints a very strong picture. So, good opening, if you ask me. I wish Apollo, god of the golden sun, had chased me through the thicket, unfazed by the branches whipping him, or the rocky soil sticking to his heels. So, I assume this means I wish it had been Apollo in place of whoever the actual perpetrator was, right? Like, that's the only way I can read that because, like, why else would you wish for Apollo to be chasing you unless it were in place of somebody else? So, like, I gather that, and I imagine most readers will gather that in the context of the poem, but could be worth getting a second opinion on that piece because initially I will say it is confusing. Like, why would you wish for Apollo to be chasing you? But as you read on, like to me, it becomes clear. Like, oh, you wish that that happened instead of something else, right? Um, on top of that, again, I think we have some decently strong imagery here. The branches whipping him, the rocky soil sticking to his heels. That line in particular, I like that a lot. That's very strong if you ask me. Um, yeah, not much else to say as of yet. I will okay, yeah, sorry. One more thing that I was thinking about, and I've been thinking about this a lot just in poetry in general, is line breaks and how purposeful each line break is. Um, it's very, very subjective, and, like, a lot of times in my first draft, the line breaks are pretty much just entirely arbitrary, like, I'm just getting anything down on paper and breaking the lines wherever I want to just for the sake of it, because it's a poem, right? And a lot of we see that in a lot of, like, amateur poetry. But, like, this doesn't feel too amateurish, honestly. I see some intentionality here. I feel like none of these lines overstay their welcome, and I feel like all of them kind of, contain, like, the rhythm, like, the necessary rhythm, you know? Like, I wish it had been me sprinting through the woods. Like, just imagine take those 2 lines. Imagine if we had put sprinting up on the first line. To me, that would read a little more weakly, if I'm being honest. Like, I wish it had been me sprinting through the woods. Yeah, that just doesn't read the same way to me. Like I said, highly subjective, right? But here, I think every line, every phrase is doing its work. And none of these line breaks feel particularly weak to me, just given what we've got. So, anyhow, good job. If I were to look back at him, would I see the flash of dark desire in his eyes? Mm, not sure if that stanza is as strong as the others in this poem. Um, I do like the flash of dark desire. Like, flash is a pretty decent word there. But yeah, I'm just not really sure what this stanza is doing for the poem. Let me rephrase. If you were to remove this stanza, would the poem really be that unchanged? I kind of don't think so, personally. Um, that's not to say there's no way this stanza could work. I think you can definitely make this work because, like, yeah, that would be very frightening, right? To look back at him and see exactly what's going on there. So I think maybe if you were to rework the last line, like dark desire in his eyes, maybe go deeper with that, right? What does that actually look like? Because I think you want the reader to be just as afraid as the speaker is, right? And so what could Apollo look like that would make the reader as afraid as the speaker is? Does that make sense? Um, so like I said, there is a way for this stanza to work. Right now, I just am not sure if it's giving us enough. That being said, like, the poem is so strong that if this is, like, the only major problem, it's pretty good, right? And pretty good stuff. I wish I had pleaded with Poseidon to save me. Save me. Okay, okay. I did want to look at something real quick. The word pleaded there. Pleaded is the commonly recognized past tense of plead, and pled is the form that can sometimes be used instead, especially within the sorry, this is from Grammarly, by the way. It's just the first link that popped up when I typed pleaded or pled. So let's see. Okay, and then the section that I was reading from doesn't even pop up. Sorry, we're We're squandering our time here. Let's go to Reddit, r/English. In a legal context in North America and England, pleaded is considered correct over pled. Most dictionaries include a distinction between legal and non-legal contexts, like this example from Wiktionary. Uh, Pled, third person singular simple present. Oh, sorry. Plead, third person singular present. Pleads, present participle pleading. Pleaded or pled in North America and Scotland. I would personally use pled in every context. I heard he pled guilty to fraud. Whether to use pleaded or pled in the news depends on the style guide of the news outlet. Okay, okay. Let's just read the line both ways, right? I wish I wish I had pleaded with Poseidon, or I wish I had pled with Poseidon. Personally, I think pled actually sounds better there. I wish I had pled with Poseidon. Pleaded is a little bit longer than pled, and it keeps us just by one syllable, it keeps us from the alliteration, right? I wish I had pleaded with Poseidon. I wish I had pled with Poseidon. This is another one of those things that's obviously subjective, and it's going to sound different to every listener, every reader. So up to you on that one, Mackenzie. But for my money's worth, I do think pled actually flows a bit better there, especially since the lines after this one are shorter. So it would look a little bit more uniform, maybe sound a little bit more uniform too. But again, subjective choice there. I wish I had pleaded with Poseidon to save me, in any way he could. Kill Apollo, kill me, just spare my dignity. That's a really interesting line. Both of those lines are quite interesting. The idea that the speaker would rather be killed than quote unquote have their dignity taken, right? There are a lot of layers to those lines, and it's impressive because the author doesn't have to actually write that much to say a lot, right? That to me is always the marker of really great poetry. So interesting. I wish I had been the one to be turned into the laurel tree on the water's glass edge and watched Apollo's eyes flash with disappointment. So here we get the word flash again, which, you know, we could call that poetic. Yeah, we could say the poem is shaking hands with itself there, right? But I would actually opt for a different verb if you're going to use flash earlier. I think there are a lot of potential verbs you could use here that could be just as, if not more interesting than flash. Um, that being said, I do see how the poem is shaking hands with itself here, and I think you can capitalize on that. We talked about this stanza earlier, how it would be interesting to go even deeper with what is it that Apollo sees when he's chasing his victim, right? And so here we get kind of the parallel action once Apollo doesn't catch his victim, right? And so again, this is just one of those things I think you could build on, if I'm being honest. Um, but strong stanza otherwise. I like the way the stanza ends. As he turned on his heel and abandoned his prize. Yeah, good stuff. I wish I could wake as Daphne, to have my body and mind intact, to be that tree on the shore, to be whole once more. And I wish I had prayed. Oh God, how I wish I had prayed. So strong ending, I think. Definitely hammers home the tragicness of this whole incident, especially compared to Daphne and how Daphne had a happy ending, all things considered. Um, of course, it's kind of interesting, right? I think again, and I mean this as a compliment. Often when I say this after having read a piece, it's a compliment, right? But often I find myself thinking, give me more, right? And I wouldn't say that if it were bad, I don't think, right? If I want more, it means you have a really strong basis in place. But I think with Daphne here, you could build on this, right? Because being turned into a tree, that sounds like a curse, doesn't it? That's gotta be like, what's the word I'm looking for? Conflicting. It's gotta be a little conflicting, right? So show us how the relief is stronger than the, uh Sorry, words have failed me today. Show us how the relief is stronger than the despair, right? Because to be turned into a tree for the rest of your life, that sounds sucky in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of nuance that you could explore with that. Um, so yeah, like I said, just show us how the relief is stronger than the despair, right? Um, because I definitely see the relief here. It's clear to me for sure. And yet I think there's some nuance that you're missing out on. Um, it could be a really perfect opportunity for a Volta, right? Like, gosh, it's tough. You could honestly write a whole separate poem about that, like maybe a sequel piece to this one, or maybe just like a companion piece that's actually from Daphne's perspective. And like Greek myths have kind of been done to death, but we keep writing about them because they're interesting. Gosh darn it. So, like, yeah, maybe I do just want a separate poem, one about Daphne and about the nuances of being a tree versus being spared from, you know, being a victim in this case. Um, but yeah, it's tough because like you've written a really strong poem here for real, and it's hard for me to read it and not think I want more. Um, so yeah, the bigger critiques I think are this 3-line stanza here and how I think you could give us a little more with that. And then later these lines that sort of shake hands with that stanza. Um, I think these lines will be all the stronger from a little more from this shorter stanza. That's my main concern with this poem, my main thing. But otherwise, I like this a lot. I think there's a lot to be had here, and that's great. Um, and if you want, you could write another poem about Daphne. And the good news is, I want more, and there is more. We've got 2 more poems here. So, this first poem is called Moon, parentheses, Earth's Perspective. Tell me, what are the stars like? Are they as distanced from you as I am? Do they talk? Do they yearn for your presence like a child yearns for her toys? Tell me, what do you taste like? Are you like the foam on the ocean's shore or winter snow? Do you taste like the cold steel of a skyscraper, ripping apart the night sky, straining to reach you? I want you as you are, brazen, unabashed. I yearn to have you, to reach out and caress the dust that hides you like a cloak. I desire for nothing more than to hear your voice, whispering the same empty promises that I make. Use your gravity, pull me under the cover of night until the sun rises again. I've always hated the cold of space. Okay, pretty good. I think the very concept is interesting. It sounds like, that the Earth is in love with the moon, but then they're separated by cosmic forces never to touch. So on its own, that premise is strong, if you ask me. Now let's take it piece by piece. Tell me, what are the stars like? Are they as distanced from you as I am? Hmm, I don't know. I feel like a nerd thinking this, but like, if we're talking relativity, are the stars really that much closer to the moon than they are to the Earth? In fact, I guess depending on the Earth's position from the sun and where the moon is in relation to the Earth in that orbit, the Earth might be closer to some stars than the moon is, right? At any given moment. I don't know. I feel like I'm being really nitpicky with that. Um, I do like the concept. I like this idea that like the moon is afforded certain things that the Earth is not. And you could build on that actually. Like the moon doesn't have the same atmosphere that Earth does, right? Maybe Earth wonders what that's like for the moon. Um, but like I said, I'm probably being nitpicky. Let's start from the beginning of the stanza. Tell me, what are the stars like? Are they as distanced from you as I am? Do they talk? Do they yearn for your presence like a child yearns for her toys? Just taking that in for a second. Do they yearn for your presence like a child yearns for her toys? It's kind of interesting, this idea that the stars would want the moon closer. I guess my question is why? Why would the stars want that, right? Uh, Granted, the Earth clearly in this poem is really yearning for the moon's presence, so I guess it's not hard to believe that everybody else would also yearn for the moon's presence. So, yeah, I think I like those lines. Um, yeah. And like I said, just this idea that like the Earth is almost envious of the moon or that the Earth wants to experience things the way the moon does. I think you can build on that even further. Second stanza. Tell me, what do you taste like? Are you like the foam on the ocean's shore or winter snow? Do you taste like the cold steel of a skyscraper, ripping apart the night sky, straining to reach you? I want you as you are, brazen, unabashed. Um, I like the stanza, I think, more than I like the opening stanza because it again kind of emphasizes those differences between the Earth and the Moon. Because, like I said, like considering the stars, the Earth and the Moon relatively aren't that far apart from the stars, right? Whereas the Earth has these experiences that the Moon doesn't. On Earth, there's ocean, there's snow, there are skyscrapers. So I really like kind of that emphasis in the divide between them, and also the curiosity of the Earth, right? I think this is a strong metaphor for two people who are worlds apart and one who really wants the other, right? And I think the language also is just strong. I like um skyscraper, ripping apart the night sky, straining to reach you. I think that's pretty good language. Um, I would build personally on the moon being brazen and unabashed because as a reader, I see that and I think, how does the speaker come to that conclusion? Why is it that they think that? Um, and if this is a love poem, which it certainly sounds like one, I think focusing all the more on the subject in that way would be beneficial, right? Um, because I think the best love poems really emphasize what's special about the subject, right? And so, why is it that the moon is brazen and unabashed? What makes it so special as to be those things, right? Yeah. Otherwise, strong stanza. I like that one. Third stanza. I yearn to have you, to reach out and caress the dust that hides you like a cloak. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about that one. I think it's strong again. We do have the repeated use of the word yearn, which uh, maybe there's another verb that you could slot in there to up the variance, up the uniqueness, maybe. Fourth stanza, I desire for nothing more. Okay, this kind of reminds me of the pleaded line in the last poem. I desire for nothing more. What if you just eliminated for, right? I desire nothing more. Doesn't that read a little better? I think it does personally. And I I've been reading this book about like how to write flash fiction and a lot of it's a compilation of essays about flash fiction and a lot of the essayists point out that poetry and flash fiction are very similar in their economy and in their intentionality. Like every word has to matter, right? You in flash fiction and in poetry, you really want to take a piece and strip it down only to the essentials, right? And personally, I just think the word for here is not an essential. Again, you can call that subjective, you can call that nitpicking, but even in terms of like rhythm and flow, I simply think I desire nothing more. I think that flows a lot better than I desire for nothing more. Just one guy's opinion. And it's a small thing, but like I said, it impacts the flow, it impacts the form and the intentionality of the whole thing. So anyway, let's not get hung up on that though. Let's read the whole stanza. I desire for nothing more than to hear your voice, whispering the same empty promises that I make. Again, that just leaves me wanting more. What are the empty promises that the earth makes, right? And to whom? Am I supposed to take this like as part of the metaphor where it's like, um, is this a human being speaking from the earth's perspective? And does the human being make false promises? Or Sorry, kinda lost my train of thought there. Like, if we're to take this literally as the Earth, then what are the false promises that the Earth is making, right? Yeah. So I just kinda want a little more there. Some people might not. I kinda do. I kinda wish there was more showing there. Anyway, use your gravity, pull me under the cover of night until the sun rises again. I've always hated the cold of space. So those were the last 2 stanzas, and I don't think I see anything wrong with those stanzas. We associate moon with night. Um, could be interesting, perhaps, to consider even further, like, what it would look like if the moon and the Earth did collide, if they did touch each other, right? I think that could potentially make for some really fascinating imagery. But yeah, just one guy's opinion. Um, I don't think I've got anything more to say on this piece. You could, again, sort of consider the line breaks, but I don't I don't know, like, I don't necessarily have a problem with them. I can, like, see kind of, I think, what the author is going for with these mostly shorter lines, so, yeah. Alright, let's move on to the last piece. Earth, parentheses, moon's perspective. My darling, I pull you to me in the shadow of daylight, but you do not feel me. Can't you hear me as I shout out your name over and over? Can you not see me during the daytime? You ignore my presence, my desperate attempts to reach out and touch. Won't you pull me close? Use me to guide you along your path. Illuminate your mountains, blossom your flowers, and pull your ocean's tides. I'll turn my back and find I am content to live in the light of night. Ooh, interesting. Okay. This kind of took a turn that I wasn't expecting because we saw the titles, right? I think I said them before we got started. And so, you know, I figured this could go one of two ways. We could have the Earth, we could have the moon's perspective, and the moon could have been like um very uninterested in the Earth, and in that sense, it could have been, like, kind of funny, which there would be strength in that, right? And there could have been more to it than just like, "Oh, haha, the Earth likes the moon and the moon doesn't like the Earth back." There could have been more to it than that, obviously. The other route this could have gone, in my mind, was that, this would be another love poem, and it would just be kind of similar to the poem from the Earth's perspective, where they would be separated, and the moon would yearn for the Earth in the same way. But instead, we've got another love poem, but one that actually kind of subverted my expectations. One where the moon says, I'm right here and like I can feel you and we're that close to each other, but you're just not seeing it. So that's really interesting. This took an unexpected turn for me, and I like that. So let's take it again, line by line, stanza by stanza. My darling, I pull you to me in the shadow of daylight, but you do not feel me. Can't you hear me as I shout out your name over and over? So that's kind of a nice pairing with this stanza in the Sun poem where it says, I desire for nothing more than to hear your voice whispering the same empty promises that I make. So this poem is neat because the previous poem was already strong, but this one kind of adds even more layers to it where it's like, why doesn't the Earth hear the moon? Is it because the Earth is too far away? Are they too removed from each other? Or does the Earth kind of choose not to hear the moon, right? Because the moon is shouting, right, over and over, it says. So what's the issue, right? And I think those are interesting questions. Second stanza. Can you not see me? During the daytime you ignore my presence, my desperate attempts to reach out and touch. Won't you pull me close? That's funny. That's kind of a funny, like, parallelism because each one is, like, asking the other to pull them in. It's kind of interesting. Again, you can call this nitpicky, but, like, does the Earth ignore the moon during the daytime? I guess kind of, right? I guess I can see where that line is coming from because my thinking was, like, you can still see the moon during the daytime, right? But the moon is that much more prominent during the night, isn't it? And I guess in the context of the first poem, the Earth really wanted, like, sort of the veil of night in a way. Yeah. Next stanza. Use me to guide you along your path, illuminate your mountains, blossom your flowers, and pull your ocean's tides. Are there flowers that blossom in moonlight? I'm curious now. That doesn't really have any bearing on the poem necessarily, but I'm actually just really curious. Hang on. Um, 8 flowers that bloom at night for a moonlit garden from Thursday. All right, cool. Yeah, that works. Um, that's interesting. I didn't know that actually. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Anyhow, um, yeah. So here we have a picture of a moon who's very selfless. And again, that sort of adds to the layers where it's like, you know, the Earth wants nothing more than the moon. And as it turns out, the moon is giving the Earth everything, and the Earth just still doesn't notice, right? So, like, is the Earth selfish? Is the Earth dumb? Or are they really just too far away, right? Is this just kind of a doomed lovers scenario? Anyhow, last stanza. I'll turn my back and find I am content to live in the light of night. So it's fascinating how this ends. Like, when the moon says that, I'll turn my back and find I am content to live in the light of night. Does that mean the moon is content as is? Because it sounds like that's already what's happening, right? The moon is giving everything to the earth, and the earth doesn't notice. So is the moon content with that? Because in the first couple stanzas, it didn't really sound like it, right? It sounded like the moon wanted some attention. So I guess I'm a little confused there. Like, is the moon saying that they will be content once they have the Earth's attention, or are they content already? If they're content already, then I feel we have just a bit of a clashing of tones. Otherwise, though, these are two strong pieces, and I like how each piece elevates the other one and gives the reader even more to consider. Now, I have a question that's sort of impossible to answer, but I do wonder if this second poem we read stands as well on its own without the first poem. I think yes, but I have no way of knowing for sure because since I read the other poem first, it's impossible to separate it now from this one. If I had read them in reverse order, then maybe I could tell you, but I don't know for sure. That being said, of course, they are meant to be companion pieces, clearly, so maybe we shouldn't take one without the other, but personally, I think poems should stand on their own, even if they're part of a collection, even if they're a companion to another poem. I think they should still have the strength to stand on their own. With these 2 poems in particular, I do think they are strong enough to stand on their own. Like I said, I can't say for certain with this one because it's impossible to separate it from the context of the other one, having read that already. But I do think they're both strong. Um, Good job, Mackenzie. I think the changes, if any, that you need to make to these poems are minimal, but I do think these would have an audience for sure. Yeah, I'm gonna be thinking honestly about the sun or the Earth and the Moon poems for a while. Just this idea of like selfishness versus distance, like what actually is going on between those two. That's really curious. Yeah, there's a lot to consider there. But ultimately, I want to thank you a lot, Mackenzie, for submitting these. Um, Really good stuff here, for real. Keep going with these and just with writing in general. These were nice. I think I've said this before on this channel and maybe on the main channel, but like usually if a poem is strong, I'm thinking more about the content than I am about the mechanics, right? So with all 3 of these, I'm thinking a lot about, what actually happened in the poem versus the poetics of the poem. So yeah, really cool. We'll close off there. I'll thank you one more time, Mackenzie. This was Mackenzie Leigh. Thank you for these 3 poems. Really cool stuff. And ultimately, keep in mind, this is a rough draft.